With season 2 just a few days away, I wanted to make a video going over some of my thoughts on Faputa, since I haven't seen too many people analyzing her character. Some of this video will reference the themes throughout Made in Abyss, and I'll have a chart in the description that goes over what each of the layers focus on. I would do a whole dedicated video going over just the themes, but I don't really want to just retread over the same stuff that I talked about in my cycles video. But if you have any related questions with themes and whatnot, feel free to just shoot me a comment. And to anyone who's here from the anime who is watching this before the season is fully over, there are going to be a lot of spoilers, so just be wary about that. Faputa is kind of weird. She doesn't really fit the criteria for either of the main groups of narahate that we've seen, and functions more like a creature of the abyss than anything. The best place to start to begin understanding her and her character is to really dig into what she is, which first we need to figure out what is a narahate. So this question is going to be a bit of a rabbit hole, pun not intended, but let's start with what we've learned so far about the narahate. So initially, the first thing that we learned was that, getting narahated is what happens when you ascend in the 6th layer. If you were protected by the love and sacrifice of somebody else, you became a humanoid animal thing. And if you weren't, you became the suggestive animal thing. Later, Bandru tells us that the humanoid narahate are narahate that have received the blessing and puts heavy importance on that. We might also get more information on the blessing in this upcoming arc, since Tsukushi has said that there's more to the blessing than what we know, and if there's anything important to this topic in Volume 11, I'll probably add it down in the comments. For reference, the full Chapter 63 came out after I'm recording this, so I have a lot of thoughts on that, and I'll probably tweak some of the themes that I talked about in the chart that I mentioned, but I'll probably make a short rambling video about that in a couple days or so, because there's a lot of interesting stuff, because having another arc on the 6th layer definitely changes what my original idea was about there being more layers beyond the 7th layer. But if Tsukushi is going to continue to do multiple arcs per layer, then that changes that out. But from the looks of it, crystallization is going to be the main new theme of this arc, as well as souls and value. I'll talk about that later. When we get to Iruburu, we learn several new things about narahate, and I'm gonna try and call it Iruburu from here on out instead of Ilblue, because it is definitely more lore accurate. And also I saw that volume 10 in the official translation uses that, so I will try and pronounce that as well as I can. We learn a lot of new things there about narahate. Most importantly, there are 2 main types from what we've seen. There might be more, but there's 2 main types. Majikaja calls Nanachi a narahate of the old ritual place, which draws a line between them and the villagers of Iruburu, as well as implying that the ritual site the Edo Front was built on was used by others to achieve the blessing, and there may be more narahate that are similar to Nanachi currently in the Abyss. Kaja also states that narahate more or less take the form of what they most desire, which when combined with the definition of narahate, which is the shadow of one's former self, that kind of paints the most solid through line between the two narahate groups. I want to dig deeper a bit now and compare the ritual and villager narahate, which is best done by comparing the abyss to Iruburu. The village is a microcosm of the abyss and kind of acts as like a foil counterpart to it. The abyss is very brutal, organic, animalistic, while the village is more civilized and structured. The former also entices people with secrets and adventure, while the latter offers like safety and comfort. And becoming a narahate in the abyss is a very brutal process that happens to anyone who ascends, and it destroys your mind in the process. While becoming a narahate of Iruburu is painless and majestic, and it only really affects those who submit themselves to the village. But in the process, it permanently traps you within the village, and you kind of lose your destination, since most of the people who are that far down are all adventurers, and usually staying stuck in one place isn't really what they truly want. Both entities also have laws that are like absolute and are enforced by a substance that are kind of extensions of themselves, which is the force field in the abyss and the balancing in Iruburu. And both also treasure value and like to keep it in balance. Now, here's the big question. What is Faputa? Because she stands in opposition to Iruburu, she takes on a lot of like the surface level traits of the ritual narahate and like the abyss in general, but to like more of an extreme animalistic degree than someone like Nanachi. Despite the design though, she doesn't really have a lot of major qualities of either group. She never used to be human, and that kind of puts into question, like, is she even really, like, would she be considered a narahate in that sense, since she wasn't, like, a transformed human? Like, the key components needed for a narahate are being derived of a human, being the shadow of one's former self, and they need to take the form of a desire, even if it's very abstract. But I think that both of these questions can be answered for Faputa together. She is kind of the shadow of Urumui's like desire itself, and she embodies the rage and frustration of all of Urumui's unfulfilled wishes. Well, the other narahate that we see seem to embody desires of like lower level values, like pretty basic surface level enjoyments or aspirations, like Ma being obsessed with like stuffed animals, or Majikaja with bodies, or a lot of like things that would be like Shi or maybe Ku, like very like basic surface level desires. Faputa burns strong with like a single pure desire. Urumui gave up everything, including her control over the village by giving up the 3 cradles, in order to birth Faputa, that kind of mimics the sacrifices that must be made for ritual narahate to receive the blessing. Faputa shows what a narahate truly is. The transformation of a person isn't really that important, that the most important thing is that embodiment of a desire. As Wazakyan says on his deathbed, it's only the accumulation that will make someone beyond human. Now that we know what Faputa is, we can start to take apart who she is. I won't be focusing too much on like her character journey throughout this arc, because Inspirational has already made a great video on that and how her character journey relates to the 5 levels of value, and it also gives a pretty good description of each of the levels, and I'll put a link to that down in the description. The one value level that I will focus on here, though, is level 2, which is Ku. This is the accumulation of the wishes of others. Ku is the focus value level for, originally I said in the cycles videos, for layer 5 and 6, but we now know that isn't entirely accurate. So Ku is the focus value for the Edo front arc and the Iruburu arc, and the upcoming arcs like the Hail Hex arc are not related to that. Ku is incredibly important to Faputa's creation, since she was born and developed through the accumulated wishes and lives of the people of the Ganja Corps and everyone who ended up in Iruburu. And I talked about that a little more on my last video on Wazakyan, which I would recommend watching because there's a lot of connections between Wazakyan's journey and Faputa's journey. Faputa is like a bundle of just a lot of raw emotions. Her compassion, her curiosity, her excitement, rage, all of that was given to her in different amounts by the three sages and her mother. All of the emotions, the actions, and inactions of the people involved in the creation of Iruburu fester inside her and fuel her. Arumui lost a lot of things in the abuse that she faced at the hands of the villagers of Iruburu. Her children, her future, her body, and autonomy. And after her transformation, the villagers continue to pump value into her, and that keeps her rotting body from being able to pass on. As we learn from the memories that Belaf gave to Faputa, Arumui had a lot of positive memories of her time with the Ganja Court, and it wasn't fully fueled by hatred, even after everything that happened. But while she was suffering and was still angry at the village to some extent, I don't think that the hate that Faputa inherited was entirely Arumui's. I think that Vueko also contributed a lot to her. And if you want a more full understanding of Vueko as a character, I would recommend watching Inspirational's other Made in Abyss video that focuses on her. Like with the Faputa video, I'll put that in the description. Vueko was devastated by what had happened to Arumui, and that she couldn't do anything to stop it. And by physically being so close to where Arumui's soul and mind was within Iruburu, and with the two of them having a very deep bond, I think these emotions kind of affected Faputa's birth. It's very difficult to draw lines within Faputa of who contributed what to her and in how much, and also like how these contributions have affected her, which will definitely keep me invested in her character in the coming arcs and see where she goes and how she reflects all of her essentially parents in a sense. The last thing I want to talk about in terms of the Iruburu arc is something that we don't really know that much about yet, which is the importance of the color gold. We only have a few minor bits of information, but I'm assuming that we'll probably get more of it in the whole Curse Fleek arc that just started. The number 5 has always been important throughout this series, like 5 whistle levels, 5 known white whistles, not including Rico, 5 levels of value, 5 leaves on the eternal fortune, etc., etc. But like, as new important 5s get added, connections can kind of be seen between them, like how the 5 white whistles can be connected to the 5 different levels of value, which I talked about in my Cycles of Made in Abyss video. And also, the colors of the whistle levels can kind of be attached to the different value levels, which we haven't seen too much of an association between those besides one color, which is the color white. The biggest thing that the color white connects to, besides the white whistles themselves, is the eternal fortune, which is held in reverence by Orth due to its stubborn nature to exist throughout the abyss on every level, no matter how harsh the environment is. And this quality is heavily mirrored in Rico. Rico's name translates to white jasmine, which is a real-world 5-petaled white flower. And Liza's attachment to its abyssal counterpart would make sense with why she would name Riko the way that she did. With Riko, to our current knowledge, being Liza's haku, based on Faputa's early definition of someone's haku being like a person that you have like the strongest bond with, a connection can be formed between like the color white and haku beyond it just being the highest whistle level. Gold has been a major motif throughout the Iruburu arc, from the 6th layer being thought of as the golden city, especially the top parts of it, to Joroimo saying that the abyss could turn trash into gold. But it isn't until the chapter 60 ending narration that we really get like a clear idea of like the true meaning of gold in this story. And I'll read through that quote. This version is from the official translation. Never to return beyond the yearning for home. Within the true darkness there certainly was a light that no one could find, but not a single person could take hold of it. The gold that was born of you is free from the yoke called value, and is now about to set off, despite knowing that love itself is a curse, despite knowing that the path leads only to darkness. But that is probably why it is so very dazzling. Gold seems to be like a 6th color, something beyond the 5 levels of value that only a few can reach. It's unclear if the only way to reach this like gold status essentially is the way that Faputa reached it, which is by moving through like all 5 stages of value and seeing through your haku, or if there are any other ways. If this is the main way to do it, like as I talked about in my cycles video, like every group of 2 arcs focuses on a new value level, starting with the white whistle that introduces it, and forces Riko to essentially pass through that value level to like proceed on to the next area. If this continues to be the case, by the time Riko gets through all 5 of the white whistles and eventually achieves her haku, she may also reach this like golden state, and we're not sure what this means, but hopefully we'll learn more about it soon. If that's the case and Riko is able to reach that, maybe then, similar to how the main 5 white whistles that we learn about early on kind of relate to those first 5 levels of value, maybe then Riko will essentially be like the white whistle representing the gold state, whatever that would be called. There are a few other things that we see that are like gold things besides Faputa that could teach us a bit more. Firstly, there's like the hair color of Riko and her mother, which would be fitting if Liza is the one to like force Riko to achieve her haku and to move beyond it. And then there's also the Golden City, which lies at the bottom of the abyss. This is only shown in the manga version in chapter 1, which in the anime it was cut out from the show. But Riko also says that it isn't the 6th layer, and when she's talking to Wazakyan, kind of talks about that like the 6th layer is only the entrance to essentially like the true abyss. Lastly, as a part of the Hariomari song, Cravali sings about sparkling gold petals that await in the faraway nest. Because of how little we know about like what exactly is going on in the Cursed Fleet arc, I can't really theorize too much about the meaning of the gold petals, besides the obvious parallel to the white petals of the Eternal Fortune. But because like something being described specifically as gold only like 3 chapters after explaining the color's importance, it seems we'll probably get at least a bit more elaboration coming pretty soon. Also, both Wazakyan and Faputa have been described as smelling like the sun. I interpret this as being like is them being originating from the surface, especially since when Faputa meets Balaf, she says that he smells specifically like Urumui, which kind of furthers that connection since Urumui used to live on the surface. Also, another thing is that the moon, not the actual moon, but like a crescent moon symbol, represents the abyss and is usually like the common like iconography for the abyss itself. And also it's like ties to darkness, and the whistle level is being designed after the colors of the night sky. In chapter 59, Vueko recognizes that the light within the darkness that she was kind of searching for was Faputa all along, who represents gold. So I kind of think that this idea of gold being that like unmatched true treasure found in the hell of the abyss will kind of be expanded upon. Okay, to lighten the mood a bit from talking about a lot of heavy themes and rabbit hole theorizing, I want to talk about something more minor, but one of the big reasons that I love Faputa as a character. One of my favorite things about a lot of character designs in this series is how Tsukushi uses abstract elements to illustrate some of the more important characters. Some examples of this are like Bondrewd being drawn with a lot of vertical lines, or like abstract flowing shapes, or having him like pop out of the panels, or with Ozen, whose body sometimes becomes like extremely arched and like blobby and kind of like bull-like, or her like inhuman contorted expressions. This is something that Wazakyan does sometimes as well. It kind of like shows his sinister side even when he isn't like when his like natural expression doesn't show it. Having a character in the party that we see consistently with features like this is pretty exciting. There's a lot of fun things Tsukushi can do to like push the design, and a lot of what we saw in chapter 63 kind of confirms that there is a lot of very strange Faputa panels in that chapter. Another major thing that will definitely keep the story fresh is how much her personality contrasts with the rest of the party. Like, we have a character who's like gentle and sweet, but like excitable and kind. One who's also gentle and sweet, but also stoic and reliable. Another one who's gentle and sweet, but like sassy and depressed. Another one who is in fact gentle and sweet, but also compassionate and a little, I don't know, quirky. And now Tsukushi essentially added a feral hog to the party. Definitely gonna be some interesting interactions there. Lastly, I feel like Faputa will add a lot of strong emotion to the coming arcs, especially because layers 6 and 7, like one of the big themes is unfulfilled wishes. And as we saw throughout Iruburu, Faputa is very sensitive to the wishes of others. Like, she helped both Prushka and Gabaroon when they were in need, despite not even knowing them at the time or even really being able to communicate with them besides reading their souls. If Gabaroon even has a soul, that's a whole different question. She was shielded from a lot of the unfulfilled wishes that happened in Iruburu due to her mixed emotions towards the people who were there and her being preoccupied with reaching her goal. Her seeing the fates of the coming characters could add a lot of interesting conflict. It might even drag the party into situations they didn't initially plan on, but only time will tell for that. And that's pretty much it. That's all of the random Faputa thoughts that I can think of. As always, if you have any questions about anything Made in Abyss related, feel free to ask in the comment section, and I'll answer as best as I can. Before I let you go, there's something that I have been noticing a lot of, which is like more people talking about that, like, oh, season 2 might not cover all of the Iruburu arc, and I want to give my thoughts on that real quick. This has been like a long time discussion, and like the fact that now season 2 is confirmed to be 12 episodes. I've heard like, oh, they're gonna have like double length episodes or are only gonna do a segment of the arc, but no, that just isn't gonna happen. The big argument for this is that like season 1 covers 3.5 volumes over 13 episodes, while season 2 is trying to cover 5 volumes in 12 episodes. But this really just completely ignores the context of how early Made in Abyss was written compared to modern Made in Abyss. It's been 10 years, and Tsukushi has changed a lot as a writer and as an artist, and the two current halves kind of Made in Abyss reflect this a lot. A while ago, I was talking about the same topic. I compared Chapter 2 to Chapter 36. Chapter 2 is very condensed. There are pages with up to like 12 panels and covered in speech bubbles, and the biggest panel only takes up about a half a page. Comparing this to Chapter 39, the first 3.5 pages are dedicated exclusively to just establishing shots, and there's like plenty of 2-page spreads throughout this entire arc. The entire Iruburu arc is filled with like emotions, action, more establishing shots, and all of these things take a lot less time to show in anime than it does in manga. Something like dialogue is kind of the opposite of that. Even though it wasn't written super recently, looking at how they adapted Dawn of the Deep Soul would give a better idea of how season 2 would be adapted, since that arc is a lot closer to the Iruburu arc than the early arcs. Dawn of the Deep Soul is about the same length as Nanachi's arc, despite the manga version of Banju's arc being about 60% of the total amount of pages that season 1 had, and it only cut about like 5 or 6 pages worth of content. In short, no, they aren't gonna cut the arc off early. Otherwise, why would they wait for volume 10 to come out and like push Tsukushi to end the arc soon? They don't need 40 minutes per episode. Adapting manga to anime is a complicated process, and the differences in mediums heavily change how that story is told and how much time is needed to tell that same story. I think we'll get a good idea for how Kinema Citrus plans to approach this arc once July 6th rolls around, because this entire arc is way more action-packed and way more focused on showing the artwork and taking a slower pace than some of the earlier arcs. And so I wouldn't worry about this, but until the 6th comes, I hope everyone enjoys at the time I wrote this, it was a couple of weeks, but now it's only a couple of days. So I hope everyone's weekends and first half of next week until the chapter drops are good. I hope you have a great rest of the day. I will see you next time.